Welcome,
Well, hello,
everybody.
everyone. Hello. It's great to be here. Hello, Mark. We've been looking forward to this broadcast for some time. We're going to get a chance to examine the third system of fortresses, and we've left some information in the descriptions about this system of Civil War constructions that were happening in the early 1800s and into the 1860s. There's 42 of them that are being considered in this file, so to speak. There's two on the West Coast. We'll be looking at Fort Point. And then there is Fort Gaines and Fort Pickens in Alabama. And Mark, who is running our Melted Reality channel, and many of you are very familiar with his work, is going to take us on a tour by means of his work. But the most important part of our broadcast is that we have a very special guest. Carl Herman is with us. He is a professional historian that has a vast amount of experience researching on subjects that many of us are following, and he is following the work of John Levi, as many of us are, and we have that in common. And we want to recognize John Levi as a foundational researcher in this field, and he produces in a way that is kindly and acceptable, and we're able to use our opinions and have a very good discussion. So we're going to replicate his example as one of the beginners in the so-called alternative research. We'd like to bring Carl Herman on immediately, and he's going to introduce himself and tell us a little bit about his background and the type of work that would make someone a historian and a professional. Let's bring Carl Herman right to the show. Hello, sir. Thank you.
Hey
Welcome,
guys,
Carl.
hey audience, thanks for having me on.
We want to
Thank
make
you
sure
so
everyone's able to hear. Can we hear the sound well in the audience? And is the picture clear for you? Hoping everything is good.
Seems like it. Yeah, thank
Many
you
of
so
you
much,
may
Carl.
have seen the TNT radio broadcast that was done about 1 month ago, and fellow researcher Chris Kelly from Old World Explorations and myself were on, and Carl was the guest following, and he had a great discussion. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Carl, and the type of work that you've done and your research, and really what's led you to some of the very careful examinations of the old world.
Okay, as briefly as possible. At age 17, I attended the opening Hunger Project presentation in Los Angeles, led by Buckminster Fuller, a mentor of mine, and Werner Erhard. And at age 17, I committed that what I should do, I test very highly academically. Doesn't make me smart at all. I don't feel that way, but I test highly. And I wanted to apply what apparently I had been gifted with for the greatest good. And I thought, hey, let's end poverty. I helped start a lobbying group, results.org, to end poverty through American domestic and foreign policy. This led to 2 UN summits for heads of state: the 1990 World Summit for Children, the largest meeting of heads of state in world history, and the 1996 or 97 Microcredit Summit, microcredit, small loans to the poorest of the poor. It was the topic of the Nobel Peace Prize in 2006. And in order to earn a living while working to end poverty, I was a public school teacher, and I volunteered to teach at the hard-to-staff schools in Los Angeles. And I was recognized by 2 Los Angeles mayors as being among the top few teachers in central LA. And I did it through the enthusiasm, because I thought that we really could have change in the world that would be progressive and liberating. But I found out that we live in an empire. And I found that out because the leadership in the 1990 World Summit for Children, that was Bush Sr. And of course, they always promise everything publicly and privately, and then they deliver nothing, and they only give bullshit excuses. And then the Clintons came on, and they said, oh yeah, we're going to fully fund those World Summit for Children goals. And micro did nothing. And so I figured we live in an empire. And then this is in the late 90s. And then I did research on the Federal Reserve, because I had to follow the money. And I do teach economics at that time. I do a credentialed school teacher in social studies and in mathematics. And so I had the economic part, and the Fed is like, whoa, total empire. And the US is the leading military power. Wow. Okay, so then I took a close look at the history books that I was teaching from, and Carl B as in Bradley Herman.blogspot.com. Go to any of the news shows, and I have an 11-part series which takes a look at our school textbooks to show that it's bullshit to train stupefied work animals for the empire. And then, you know, as a historian, you think, how far back does this go?
It's like we froze your video's frozen.
Oh.
Your video's frozen.
Sorry. Let me.
It's no problem. It's no problem at all. We're right at the 7-minute and 46-second mark in the stream. So maybe you could tell us about. We want to keep our show brief as possible. Tell us a little more about where. I'm sorry I interrupted you. I'd like to bring you right back in. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm trying.
Very good. We've lost your video, but I'd like you to tell us wrap up your story and tell us about what you've discovered.
Yeah. So in taking a look for the last 5 or 6 years into the broad topic of Tartaria, you do see that the timelines for the construction are impossible. And given that, applying my government and economics hat, once we've established that the government are liars, and we have, and that's definitively demonstrated through the lie-started treaty-violating wars of aggression, then withdraw consent from anything else that they say. And the prima facie evidence is that these buildings are superior to anything that we can do today. The timelines are impossible. The budgets are impossible. And then the concept that these are temporary buildings when they're fully functional, that's ludicrous. And my advocacy is withdraw consent, demand arrest of the so-called leaders, and then we need to rip open the truth out of the Smithsonian.
It seems like there's going to be a break in disclosure of information, and a lot of people, by their research, are making that obvious to their audiences, that the stories that we're supposed to believe out of the mouth of, in my case, park rangers, are telling us that these megalithic blocks were delivered from Chinese ships in the 1840s. And Mark has been to these fortresses, and we're seeing astronomical amounts of bricks being delivered, but we don't have any construction photos or records of it. And most of these fortresses, and we're examining specifically the third system, are very badly damaged. Very badly damaged. What was it about the John Levi channel, Carl, that really opened your eyes to the narrative that you might have been inadvertently teaching was not correct?
Well, I don't know specifically about John. John's presentation is great. You're great. I've seen dozens of these histories, so I can't pinpoint exactly what it was that flipped me over. But I think that the World's Fair, no, I think it's this, because I did choose the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair in order to do one of our news shows on. My parents are from St. Louis. My grandparents probably attended that fair. And my own wife and daughter, the movie, the 1944 Judy Garland film, Meet Me in St. Louis, is one of their favorites. And I have inadvertently watched that film about a dozen times. And that last scene where our masters put it in our face, say, they're not going to tear it down, are they, Grandpa?
Right out of the mouth, the little girl spoke. They made the girl say it. The little girl had to say the lines.
Yes, she's still alive, by the way. And that was after the trauma-based mind control lie of saying, the Galveston event, we saw that dead bodies everywhere, mud. And so they're telling us.
Right.
Yeah. They always tell us.
It's astounding. So we really thought it would be fun to invite you on our show and give you a brief tour of some of these sites from the Civil War era that we've investigated in person. And we have enough time to show some clips, and we'd love to have you interrupt the video from time to time and tell us what you see, or possibly remark on some of the logistics you feel that would be involved to pull off some of these constructions. Would you like to come and see those videos with us?
Oh, yes. Let's go.
Let's do it. So Mark is going to be our
I recently visited Fort Gaines,
and he's going to take us from some clips from his channel, and let's listen carefully. And Carl, you have the floor.
All right. Well, I looked at all the clips, and the main thing I'm talking about, or I noticed that you guys are going to point out, is the damage to these bricks. This is where we need expert witnesses who can tell us what are the sources of energy that would produce that type of damage. Now, this first one, that wall that Mark pointed out, that melted wall, what type of energy was directed onto that wall to cause that damage? And then what are possible sources for that? Because you have to conclude that the Tartarians, or whoever they were, wiped out a civilization. They lost a war. Now, in losing a war, you're going to have different types of attacks. And was this some sort of an overload of the power system generated by these structures and stored in the bricks? Was it directed weapons? Was it both? Those would be some of the questions that people with academic training and professional experience could help us out, to put us in the ballpark of what might be possible and what would be impossible. That wall is brilliant. And I'm with Mark when he asked the question, is like, how come they left that in? I think they're proud of the stuff they do.
I think so too.
Yeah, Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying, I think so too, Carl. I think they purposely leave things for us to find and really make fun of us almost. It's everywhere. They do it all the time. And the thing about this wall here is, when I was there, people were just walking by it. They weren't paying it any attention. It's the most incredible piece really there. The whole thing's incredible, but it's just amazing how people really don't pay attention to this kind of stuff.
Mark, is there an official story about how the wall got damaged?
No, I looked in the museum. I looked everywhere. I didn't really ask about it, but I can't find anything on the specific wall. The only thing it says is, as far as this certain fort is, it started in 1817 or 1819, then to 1821. Then it was postponed, supposedly, and then didn't start back until 1854 or 7. And then it was never completed. It's all over the place, basically.
Okie doke.
Yeah. But the amount of heat damage that, like you're saying, it looks like it's just incredible, especially in this one spot. But it's all over this fort and all the forts.
I like this point coming up here where there's an obvious change in the material, like the heat was much greater until it wasn't, and then it's actually usable construction, but something dramatic happened there.
Yeah, and at first I was thinking that maybe they patched it up or something, but I think all this is original from whenever.
So we can begin to develop a vocabulary to talk about this. This is directed energy, and it looks like a directed energy weapon, because it wasn't some big event, a huge blast or something from the sun. This was specific and targeted.
Yeah, seems like it might have been an instant frequency shift, which would as quickly as it changed, it would as quickly return to solid and not actually collapse, like a wave going through it, like a ripple, like a vibration, a movement through the matter at the atomic level.
Yes. Let me. Yeah, it's all on that. Oh, wrong one.
That's
so he's going to bring. He would like to bring it to a portion of the video where we're going to see some of the masterful construction.
Yeah.
That is being done in a time when labor and tools and logistics were supposedly first emerging. So he's blasting through some of the places in Fort Jefferson, but we want to focus on the places that we've actually been. This is Mark's personal footage as he toured the facilities, and I think it's interesting to be able to speak on it after reflection in an environment to discover together what we're seeing. Let's roll again, and Carl, tell us what you're seeing.
You know, I'm looking at the brickwork with the angle of the bricks and the slant of the bricks and the changing directions of the bricks. Now, the official story is military. Military would not do that. And again, I don't have the background in masonry to be able to
But I think
respond.
I must interrupt you. You do have a background in mathematics, yes?
True, yes.
What do you think about calculating the materials needed for a build like this and all those angles to create intersecting arches and half rounds and all the variety of masonry that he's showing us? What do you think about that?
There would be questions as to the purpose of that. And
Look
just
at
by
that.
yeah, that's crazy. Like, I don't even know if that's possible. I don't know if modern people, if you showed somebody who does bricks, would say, oh, yeah, that's and they'll be able to talk about it. Or whether they'd look there and say, huh, wonder how they did that. I don't even know.
And the strange thing is here too, this is actually Fort Pickens that's showing that the other one was Fort Gaines, and it's only in one room on both of these forts. So something's going on and they're very small rooms. And so you're going to build this pre-Civil War time with the Fort Pickens 21.5 million bricks. I'm not sure what Fort Gaines is, but you would just never do this. It's just, and one's on an island, one's on a peninsula of sand.
Those five interior angles from the top, I did notice that those 5 interior angles were not uniform. One was much bigger. And then my lunch break, he asked a chat AI the questions for one of the sites. I forget which episode and website, but he said, hey, how long would it take in order to logistically deliver these materials to the construction site? And that itself blew the whole narrative out of the water. So again, that would be helpful to find out. For this amount of material to get it there with that technology, what are we practically looking at? That would be another good question. That brickwork is so amazingly done.
Yes, it's incredible.
Notice the spiral staircase that was in that last clip. This looks identical to the interior of Fort Point. It's as if we're looking at a different section of the fort and the same blueprints were used. And the forts are 2,500, they're 2,025 miles apart in distance. And it looks like the same crew was there.
Now, for that particular room, do we know what the official story is of what that room is designed for?
No. This was right through the it's a very dark room. There's nothing in it. It might be a 10 by 10. There's nothing as far as this certain room. I couldn't find a narrative. Unfortunately.
Can either of you think of any purpose for the brick design? Like, why do that slant area?
I have no idea. In the floor here.
I would guess that so from an architectural standpoint, that arch is a very strong shape, and the barrel vault, and then the interior colliding barrel vault, which this one seemed to have five sides, like you mentioned. So obviously for strength, but then the design in the bricks itself, or the bond, where you see the long and the short and the various rows, that is a way to boost the integrity strength of the wall by maximum interlocking of the bricks themselves. So some are more facade and some are absolutely structural. And so we see that repeating design showing up over and over again.
And going back to that floor that we just saw, is that evidence of heat for the destruction of just the floor only?
Yeah, it seems to be, in my mind, heat coming from the bottom, because a lot of, as I'll show here, you'll see brick floors, you'll see stone floors, and then you'll see just pieces of brick and mud floors, and just in a few rooms. I think it just got super heated from the bottom in certain spots. That created this effect. Like there is brick. That's all brick. um, it's like it's churning, and here's another room like that. But
That's crazy. What happened there?
So the mortar has completely disintegrated to where the particles have no bond strength with one another any longer.
yeah, I picked that up, and it was not sand. There's not hardly any sand inside of this fort anyway. But I was thinking salt. No, I didn't taste it, but I think it was the mortar. That's just going through.
What would be the physical process to transform mortar into that powder? I have never seen that.
No,
that's one of the questions we were hoping you would ask.
Yeah,
Is what it actually take, because we don't see that type of thing happening before our eyes, and it's very difficult to replicate because it seems to be very high temperatures for a very short period of time. Not the ones, the areas that where it's just unrecognizable and flowing across large areas of land. Once it goes to a certain length of time, it's no longer recognizable. But we're trying to figure out what temperature. It seems to be somewhere, some are estimating 10 to 60,000, but maybe for a blink of an eye, it's completely disassembled and left alone as quickly as it happened. But the source, the time, we have clues, but we can't clearly see the source.
Yeah, and just the scholar in me again just points to, wow, we need to get people who know what they're looking at, who can put it into the range that you're doing, Kairos, with the range of temperatures, the range of time, what would be the possible energy sources that would produce that, and then that localized area, that would look like that was a weapon that was
I'd like to
discharged.
pause that right here, and let's examine this together.
Yep.
And just tell us what are we? I see concentric rings. I see high quality metal. Carl, what do you see?
Yeah, and see the granite in two sections and the metal ring, and they did have those anchors going in, and what you had pointed out, Kairos, as well, which seemed like insulation around wires. So this looks like something that would produce energy. The brickwork is, again, they're showing off with that, which is fine. So I think the official story with that is just a gun turret. And I don't know
Right.
enough about those mechanics to be able to quickly look, and the beveling of those four sides as well.
Right.
But I don't know enough about the mechanics of those guns to know if that is true or if it was plopped on top of something else. I just don't know, but it raises a lot of questions.
Yes, it does. The pictures of the guns always look suspicious to me. My go-to first point of examination on these historical photos is right to the shadows. Let's look at the shadows in the photo. And a lot of times things that should have shadows don't. Some have shadows that are longer and wrong directions, and you see light sources, multiple light sources in the same photos. And then there's a cannon on top. And so, so we're left with that. But I wanted to, when he brings us to a piece on the footage where it's in very good shape, I'd like to have him pause it there. And I'd like the three of us to look at it real carefully, because we're going to compare the exact same design, pedestal, materials in a very different state found 2,000 miles away. And this, that one there looks very bad shape, but the one that had the bricks intact, I'm hoping we see that again.
Yeah, that one got hit with energy because of that whole foundation. Something hit that big.
yeah, you can see the cracking almost all going in line with the iron piece there too.
Carl, one of the consistencies that's being seen everywhere we're examining all the various researchers is everything seems to go to that light tan and gray ash color, and it starts to be very brittle and then it becomes lighter in weight and integrity until it crumbles away. That seems to be the transition we're seeing. It goes to that tan color, but it, from this photo, it looks like it was once all red. Wouldn't you agree?
I don't know about it all being red, but that progression of the stages of deconstruction, that is interesting.
So as we look through the videos, be on alert to the various stages of the individual bricks and recognize they may have been red brick, and see if it if you start to see a pattern emerging.
Yes.
What did they tell you about this, Mark?
Right here.
Right, the shell hole.
Yeah. So shell from the ship hit this certain spot in the fort. Well, unfortunately for them, there's spots like this all over the fort. So you have bending of the bricks here. You have the brick almost changing to what we call rock in certain spots. But they only give reference to this one spot when the whole place looks like this, basically, with a huge sign.
Right, that it was. So we start to think about what were the purpose of these buildings.
Yeah.
And who is going to come upon them. And some of the locations of those 42 fortresses are very remote. If you're not familiar with Fort Jefferson, that's a really nice little research topic. It's I believe it's 70 miles off the coast into the Gulf of Mexico, and it's the largest brick structure in the Americas, is what they say. But now we're finding there's conflicting numbers of bricks, possibly with Fort Gaines and Pickens as well. But it's what, built in a year, Mark? Fort Jefferson is what they're telling us. 1 year build.
Jefferson, was it one? I can't remember on Jefferson now.
That's a.
I know that
topic.
Pickens was 5 years, from 1829 to 1834, and then with 21.5 million bricks, and then the 16 million bricks Fort Jefferson. I had that down here, but I don't. Can't remember. I apologize for that.
No problem. What do you say we go to the? Do you have a little more footage coming right up in your clip? Let's go ahead and continue. Let the ears roll some more. And I'd like Carl to.
Fort Jefferson, let me just jump in
more.
and part of the military strategy for that. The story is that Fort Jefferson was a military base to protect shipping. Okay, then you would need either a port right there. Otherwise, it's not going to do any good. It's just out in the middle of nowhere. The ships are just going to go stay out of range of any of the cannon. So
Right.
whatever that thing is, and these things are in the water, which seems to be consistent with the power generation, somebody wanted that there to invest a lot of materials. And again, that's crazy damage that we're looking at.
Yes, there's iron too on the top. There's like 3 or 4 places where the iron is. That looks almost like the brick, but just incredible brickwork, just for war, right?
And I'll point out a distinction is that one level of the inquiry of the work that truthers and anywhere are doing is to refute the official story. That part is relatively easy. Now, the second part is a completely different level of challenge, which is to kind of back engineer what these things were. Because we're not going to get the truth unless we get the arrests and can rip open the Smithsonian and the Vatican and somehow find out from the source.
Yeah, exactly.
So
I agree with you.
I think we're in agreement that these appear to be part of a power grid in their nature.
Yep.
Their chemical makeup, the metals made of stones that have crystalline structure, some are magnetic, some are insulating, various transmissions of heat. We're seeing the proximity to water and a lot of times seawater. So and then we're trying to figure out the relationship between energy extraction, and it looks like those energy cells had various degrees of overload. We seem to be seeing that.
And I did look up Fort Jefferson. They claim that construction began in 1825 and was completed in 1826.
Right. So I would love to break that down for just 1 minute together. So imagine 16 million bricks, and we're going to palletize that somehow, and we're going to put that onto a freight train and deliver it somewhere. So how long would it take to fill that order now? If I just wanted to call somebody and tell them I need these bricks immediately, so how soon and how long is that train? So just
how many ships do you need after
right.
that?
Yeah.
This is not this is correct. This is by water.
Yeah. 90 miles or 70 miles, something like that, from Key West. So just out in the middle of nowhere.
That one has a melted stamp.
Yep.
What it looks like. Yep. Yeah, it's the only one I saw in there. I've seen this powder looking stuff one other place. I can't remember it was the Fort Pickens or if it was just a brick wall somewhere where I was at, but just crazy stuff. And like here, it looks like it's just totally just melted out. And if you do it in a micro level, it could be anywhere, any rock formations or anything out in the desert or wherever, Petra, anything like that. To me, that's like a micro level of it.
So if these things cooked out internally and you had some sort of a fractal explosion that would travel in patterns similar to a lightning flash or what you would see on the ground, that may be it that we're looking at, is that it just burst open and part of the structure absorbed that energy and part of it didn't in that type of flash.
Yes, it seems like a lot of the internals of the buildings too went first. You have the outer layering of the brick, and then inside of it, it's even more cooked out. That's how they did it, right? Let's see. Let's see, where are we going here? There we go. Here's some stuff on my screen.
Well, we can hear you just fine, Carl, but unfortunately your video is still frozen. And
yeah, I see it too. I'm glad it's not a totally goofy.
It's not all the way there. Not all the way goofy. It's close. It's
a good frozen news.
It's still okay.
I think it's a good look.
That's right. Well, Mark is going to continue, and we'd like to show we're going to show the similarities now between two structures that are separated by over 2,000 miles, and it looks like we're visiting the same place as we're soon going to see. And this is going up one of the granite spiral staircase, self-supporting center pedestal staircases. And we want to think about, if you don't know the formula for calculating the weight of stone by the cubic foot, Carl, it's 180 pounds per cube. So when you see one of these 8-footers by 4 foot, you can see that the weight is astronomical.
Yeah, this is pre-power tool and I don't know the lifting capacity of cranes, but it is just crazy. And you should say something about that insulation that we're looking at right there.
Right. Let's just stop right there for a second and have a look at what seems to be squeezing out of the. Are you able to pause, Mark? There you go. Back with one on, just get it to a terminal again, and yeah. So those are iron rods that have been installed in that granite block, which resembles exactly the blocks that were found in Alabama. And the rings that we saw, those concentric rings in the previous photo, are gone. But there seems to be some sort of a plastic or an insulating component that is being forced out through the borehole surrounding the rod. And the granite's intact, but the internals, you see that aggregate going up towards the center where the tapered section is. We're going to see that that's actually the brick again, but it's been overheated. And some of these pedestals we're going to continue on and look at have been very overloaded. But it looks like the same builder brought them in.
Yeah, and I also see that everywhere, Kairos. Not only forts, other stuff have that insulation over or around that iron, that metal.
So when I first saw this in person, to me it looks like the top of a D-cell battery that you put in your flashlight or your camp lantern, those big ones. So it's got that nub on top, and you stack them together, or depending on what type of device, they run them with a power supply to link them together. Pretty simple. But these are all lined up, and they're in a massive brick structure of it is precisely assembled with complicated geometry. And this was done when the population in San Francisco was very small, and there were projects that were every bit as interesting all around, including Alcatraz being built simultaneously. What do you think of these angles and geometry, Carl? That's a 7-foot thick wall, by the way.
That is just crazy. Again, this is non-military design. There is no way military would do that. And again, the heat damage is what raises the question. And in the introduction part, you showed and were touching one of those metal rings going around that had been the recipient of a lot of energy, and one of them was intact. So again, the question is, wonder what could have caused that damage to fry that metal that badly.
That's right.
Yep.
Now have a look at those cornerstones in the masonry.
Yeah,
so those are large. Those are precision granite blocks that are on repeating complicated angles, interior and exterior, with machine tool marks present. Here's one of our first covered battery tops. Something happened here, and it had to be covered, and the damage starts to intensify. Look at that metal. It's just disintegrated. It's completely gone.
Maybe they don't want you to look inside to see what's down there, because you're not going to see the foundation of a cannon. You're going to see something else, whole connected system.
I think that's correct. And underneath this specific fort, and I believe under others, but they do disclose that there are water cisterns underneath, and a lot of them are cemented over and not accessible, and they do enter tunnels that go into the city, I believe, right underneath there. The brick tunnels are present.
Yeah, in Kairos, you were telling me that little gem of San Francisco has over 1,000 miles of tunnels down there.
That's true. And
so they had time for this, for Alcatraz, and for the tunnels.
That's imagine a tunnel 1,000 miles long. So I mean, how many feet can you get in one pallet of bricks to make your 1,000-mile long? And so they don't. So right there, so you see that little battery? It was kind of a little. I want to just stop because I thought it was kind of funny.
I think God was giving you a sign there.
It was a literal copper top battery.
Yeah.
It was it's like I'm down here doing my thing, and then boom, Duracell.
There it is.
right on the spoke of a star fort overlooking the Golden Gate Strait. Fascinating.
And those bricks are just demolished.
And look how doesn't it look that there might have been some extreme heat blasting out from that area, taking these bricks apart?
Something, yeah. Something.
And it's capped. They capped it. So it was a very beautiful day, and it was nice to be outside. I think that's the stop point. Let's see if that's the stop point. No, maybe continue for a moment. Let's have a peek. Yeah, let it roll a little longer. So now these, as it rolls, What do you notice the similarities from the distant third system fort, Gaines and Pickens? Do you see the similarities?
Yep. And that begs the question of what is that designed for? And we don't have the opportunity to do that because we'd have to get access to underneath these things and pretty much rip it apart. And there's that
Look at that
metal ring. Yeah. Do you know what type of metal we're looking at?
No. And look what shape it's in. It seems just resilient. You know, this is supposed to be, they took the cannons away, and that's what's left behind, is what we're supposed to be told. It's supposed to be some kind of a rolling ring, so you can pivot this massive cannon and somehow have accurate shots against something. But this one that's coming up is very unique. It's been capped, and even what capped this one here, even what capped the component is really badly damaged too. And now there's metal squirting out from underneath the concrete. And how would you describe that metal compared to what's 10 feet, 20 feet away? What is that?
Yeah, that has absorbed energy. That has taken a hit.
And look at you can still look at the machine marks on the granite right next to my thumb. That's saw cut.
Yep.
And those it's octagonal. We're seeing that repeating use of the octagon in the construction. But some of those blocks around the perimeter, when you start to imagine how many cubic feet are there, like it could be 8 or 10 cubic feet, and now you're approaching, you know, look at that. That's a good stopping point from that video. And I wanted to move to what I think is maybe the most interesting part of the third system fortresses that we've spoken about, and that has to do with the seawall at Fort Point itself. Many tourists come here and they go inside the fort and they walk around and they take pictures, but they do not see a megalithic polygonal granite seawall with repeating hexagonal shaped blocks. They don't see that. And many of them are over 5,000 pounds each, and it's 1,800 feet long, and it's 50 feet tall, and its foundation is always below sea level. So there's no construction photos, and the rangers will tell you that all of the blocks were delivered prefabricated in the hulls of Chinese ships during the pre-Civil War time. So apparently communications and ordering and all of that was happening. But this footage is going to examine this wall up close. I think he's getting close to finding it.
Trying to, yeah.
He'll do it. He'll do it. I want to talk a little more about the wall itself, though, because we're going to see that there's evidence of heat and machining. How could they have built a wall of that magnitude with the ocean in the way? Right now, you cannot build that. You'd have to build a seawall before you could build your seawall. It's the foundation's always below the water. Also with Fort Jefferson, its moat and foundation and brickwork, as seen by scuba divers, is again always below sea level. So we're seeming to recognize evidence that the sea levels were once considerably lower. And you may be aware of some of the finds off some of the oceans at the 400-foot level where civilizations and relics are being seen. Okay, so here we are back at Fort Point, but we're outside. And tell us what you're seeing and how it makes you feel when the park rangers are telling us that this was done in the 1840s and 50s without modern methods. So go ahead and run that, please, Mark.
Yeah, again, I like what my lunch break did, is actually trying to calculate an estimation of how many ships, how long would it take. I did look up the construction of that. The claim is that Fort Point took 8 years to build.
I would love to see any construction photos, and I kind of say it just tongue in cheek. There are none.
Yeah.
There's none. So have a look at this wall. So take note of the shape of the surface you're seeing and the size of these blocks. These are solid granite, and they're huge. And it goes a really long way.
And what size of a cart would it take to carry one of those stones in the 1850s or whatever it is?
Well, I'll tell you, those large blocks would probably overload my heavy-duty work truck right now. That would be absolutely off the table. I can't imagine any type of a wooden cart or a sled that could be pulled by animals. But the you'll notice all those granite, all the boulders that are in front of the wall itself that are obscuring the height, the true height of the wall. So these boulders have been added. So if you look at some of the historical photos, you'll find that this wall is about 5 stories tall, maybe 4 stories tall at the lowest tide, and it's 1,800 feet long. There's approximately 80 million tons. And the anchor points of the Golden Gate Bridge are built inside the perimeter of this granite seawall without modification. That's a pretty formidable wall, and it survived. This building survived every major earthquake of the Bay Area, and it's on what they say is it's the worst area in the city. This is the Marina District, where the highways were collapsing almost within sight of this building, and this one has no trouble. So so have a look at this wall, and notice there's metal between the joints. If you haven't seen that, it's have a look between the wall. Have a look between the joints themselves as I zoom right in. This may not be the right sequence here, but we don't need to really go through all of it because we've shown you so much. That what type of questions are you find yourself asking right now with this research? Look at those. Those were done with core drill holes.
Yeah. Now, the idea of building a sea wall, I have no idea what that takes, but that is going to be an additional level of challenge than building an ordinary wall, and having somebody who actually does that for a living to be able to comment on how much work is involved would be amazing. And the purpose, I have never heard of metal plates in between stones in construction. I have heard of those connecting metal bars going back to Egypt between stones. But I can't think of what the purpose would be for those metal plates other than some sort of a power, an electrical power transfer.
I agree with that. I didn't know about the metal, and it's not obvious. I had only done some research, and I had seen what appeared to be rumors that it might have been lead between the joints. And it seems very brittle, and I don't know if it was lead, but something that may have connected the larger stones, which are mainly, again, crystalline structure. We're near salt water, very high hydrogen availability, and a lot of moving water, and we don't know how that works out. I don't know if you can play the sound. I thought this was kind of a funny interview. I don't know if you saw this guy. This guy, I met a tourist.
Want me to back it up a little bit?
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, just kind of take a short little break and listen to this man's what he knows about the building. Can't hear the audio yet. we're not able to really hear the audio of the man speaking, but he had noted that in the movie Vertigo, the Alfred Hitchcock movie, that you can clearly see that all those boulders had not been installed yet, as one of the actresses in the movie had actually dove straight off there into the ocean, where now you would dive onto the rocks. So you can see that a huge amount of boulders have been added there. I'm not sure what they're shoring up. It certainly doesn't need to be there. The wall is perfectly strong on its own. But I think right after this clip here, I'm right down in here. We're gonna see the metal up as close as you can. So see what you can make of this. So each joint has what appears to be about a 1/4 inch thick of metal between each of these very large granite material, possibly capable of piezoelectric discharge. Are you familiar with that term, Carl?
Just by recognizing it, but not being able to explain the details of it.
Okay. So the concept is that when you amass large volumes of weight on top of each other, in its nature, it essentially squeezes the potential electricity out of it, just the fact that you have stacked so much weight on top of itself. So granite is one of the materials that seems to be most suited for that. And that's why we see so much of that material specifically used in the internals of the Great Pyramids. So you have a huge volume of mass on top of a stone that in its crystalline nature can either release, store, or utilize electrical current. But this is lost technology in our minds, so we don't know, but it seems to be possible because that's what's sitting here in front of our faces.
Yeah.
Just the size of those is amazing. I mean,
and the precision of the build, you'll notice that's a very flat plane, and the angles are true, and the surfaces are vertical. And as you go around the perimeter of the building, it actually takes on more of a concave surface. Can you pause it there really fast, please?
yeah, I wanted to.
So this is a massive iron infrastructure that has been machine cut and installed into one of the largest seawalls I've ever seen. So what were they discharging from this place? Or was that conduit? Or were they drawing water into behind the wall? So many questions I have, and I'm not really I'm not able to research the answers with what's available now. That's tremendous ironwork.
That would be something to question. I have no idea what that thingy on the top would do.
Yeah, right.
So look at this. That's an inside corner where the wall goes from one direction to another and then continues on for a great distance. And the precision of the work, it's all the way down to the sand. So a lot of it, this is just a couple of courses. Some of the older pictures look like they may have as many as 10 courses. And you're still not seeing the foundation. Well, let's go ahead and stop it right there, please.
Pause it or stop it?
Please stop. Yeah, that'd be a great place to stop. So that's the those are the clips that I have, and that's the end of the information that I was hoping to share with you. Carl, what is your impression of the build quality? Never mind the heat damage, but if you're able to imagine what this looked like when the builder signed off on it, what's your impression of the quality of the build compared to what might be in your town or my town?
It would seem to be superior. It would seem to be nearly perfect, and it would seem to be therefore nearly impossible given pre-power tools and horse and buggy technology and the population levels as well.
Right. So I think your assessment was correct, that the narratives that are being given to us it's just more more lies being presented as fact by the same crowd. Does revealing things that seem, pretty harmless, we're looking at old architecture, does showing off the fact that the narratives are untruthful, does that help people maybe as a stepping stone to see other more important topics or lies as well? What's your opinion of that?
Oh, absolutely. This is an emperor's new clothes condition, and that, like in the fairy tale, anybody who opens their eyes can see it. You just have to have a clear enough mind and a lack of prejudice or programming or whatever in order to see what's in front of your own eyes. And once you see one area clearly, then it is a short bridge to any other area, because if you really do see that they're lying here, then where wouldn't they lie?
Right.
Exactly. That's the first thing, Carl, that got me into boots on the ground too, is comparing, going to one place and go to another place. And then you just keep seeing kind of the same things, but maybe in a different damage of bricks or anything, bricks, mortar, the stonework. And the thing is when I started looking up the narratives and stuff, because history was so boring to me in high school and college and stuff. So when you really start looking at the narratives and comparing the very few black and white pictures they have, and when I'm there and say Kairos is where he's at or wherever, they're not even the same place most of the time. Some of them, I'm not talking like all the black and white pictures are older ones, but a lot of them are not truthful either. Like they've been stitched on or just somewhere else.
Yep. In the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair, part of the topics that we went over in detail with private investigator Brian Davidson is that the photographs of the alleged construction are completed buildings with scaffolding around the outside. And then my lunch break pointed out, hey, look there's a sign. They're painters. And they're holding paintbrushes.
Exactly.
They're not building the buildings.
Right. I kind of wonder with all the old towns around me, especially, there's a lot of white painted on the brick. So they just go around painting all the brick buildings white. Just really doesn't make sense, but I have no idea.
Yes. So we've seen that the logistics are impossible and the technology was lacking, the population not skilled and not available, and transportation was limited. So we're trying to figure out how long ago were the buildings built? Who were the builders? Do you have any ideas?
That is a good question, but I like what you were thinking about, Kairos, of talking about the eucalyptus grove ages. And where I'm living in Mission Viejo, I'm right above the ravine, above the train tracks, and the eucalyptus trees are all around those train tracks.
Well, we have our guest we were hoping to bring in. This is we'll have a chance to do a kind of an abbreviated version of what we were hoping for on TNT Radio with Chris from Old World Exploration. Let's bring him right in and say hello.
He's in.
Hello.
What's happening, Chris?
Hey, Chris.
Hey, Carl. Nice to see you.
Thanks.
We've been looking carefully at some of these structures, and Chris has a lot of knowledge on some of the older structures as well. Is there anything you'd like to ask Carl about what he's seen or his conclusions on? He's examined a lot of our work. He finds what we're doing is useful.
Yeah, no, I've been listening for the last half hour or so. I was having supper with the family.
Oh, very good.
Yeah, it sounds like Carl's got his finger on the pulse of what we're looking at, and maybe the next step is where do we go from here? Like, bring in more experts, try to dissect these things a little bit better. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that you're going to learn, go walking the path to see what happens. And after 47 years of this stuff, I don't think that any real truth is possible until we have this Emperor's New Clothes breakthrough and people recognize that that it is a lie and that the people at the top get arrested. And then I think we're going to have unexpected resources, and then we're going to find out a lot. And then it'll be very interesting. if people want to knock on doors of the leadership and ask questions, you're going to be able to document the bullshit that they tell us. And it's always interesting finding people who are expert witnesses to take a look, because they're going to see things that we can't see.
Mm-hmm. What would you recommend that some of the independent research community members what should we focus on to be effective? What are you seeing? What would you like to see this group of independents doing?
Exactly what you're doing is synergy, brothers. You have found some passion and you've let yourself loose, and I think that works. I don't want to say a kind of magic, but it does kind of work. A kind of magic where different ideas come to you and leads are tossed into your lap. So when we explore, it seems that we are given assistance and guidance. And if you just look into your own heart and mind of what excites you the most and feels most important, I think that the steps going forward will open doors.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to elaborate just briefly while Chris is here about the phenomenon of the El Camino Real, which covers the entire west coast of California, well into Mexico, but it has to do with the eucalyptus trees and using them as a dating mechanism. Chris, are you familiar with these trees that are so-called non-natives that are brought from Australia and planted in pioneer days? Do you know about this?
No, I don't know much about that one.
Okay, so I'm finding that a lot of people are unfamiliar with the fact that all of these trees were planted by hand along the entire route of what was being established on the West Coast by means of missions and presidios and various cathedrals and all the towns along the coast. This El Camino Real route runs the entire length, and the eucalyptus trees are along the entire route. Some say from Sonoma, California to Guatemala. But what I'm discovering is that the trees themselves are older than the communities that they are grown in, according to the narrative. So you might have 300 or 400-year-old trees near a 150-year-old building. So the length, the trees should be newer, planted after the builds, right? I think it's a very interesting field of research because the trees are planted in straight lines with very precise geometry, and they intersect most of the common routes. What's the highway in your town, Carl? On the
we have
on the
Highway
El Camino?
5. The El Camino Real goes right along the 5 where we are in southern Orange County, and those eucalyptus trees are everywhere. And if you think about the root system networks of the trees and the idea of using a mineral structure, the bricks, in order to maintain an energy exchange, the presence of trees may also be a type of technology that would be interesting to consider, or at least the question of what do they do? Why do they plant the trees?
Right. I've seen huge polygonal structures that take up miles of many acres, and they seem to be fireproof. So when the areas are subjected to fire or damage, they grow back, and they can be much older than they even appear. They may be a second generation off the stump, where the stump is it could be 10 or more feet below ground. So they're very mysterious to me, but they don't belong here. And a lot of the trees seem to be maybe older than their namesake from Australia proper, the blue gum variety. I would love it if you took a look at that. I know that they're in your backyard, and you probably know exactly what they smell like. They're very unique, aren't they?
Yeah, the eucalyptus oil. I love that too.
They say that the oil and the bark have some curative properties, and some people swear by them for relief, or possibly from outdoors, maybe keeping insects off, skin, maybe fleas for cats. Very interesting. But it's always spoken of as a nuisance now, though. When you speak about the whys why do they choose to plant them all here? They would say it was for lumber purposes, but then when you find out this is some of the hardest, most difficult and oil and sap rich tree, so it's very dangerous to burn. It burns very hot and very fast. It's very hard to cut, and they were hoping, according to the narrative, to use them for railroad ties. But of course they twist, and you can't drive a stake through that. It's like iron, and they really don't come to maturity maybe until 200 years plus from planting. So anyone planting them would be doing so on behalf of their great-grandchildren or later. And that would be the same for their idea of using them as windbreaks, which I walk amongst some of the tallest, and they, if anything, they accelerate the wind. They it becomes even more exciting, but it doesn't block the wind itself, though. So I think Carl, you had mentioned possibly a relationship between the trees and the land, and of course, the wind is a component we don't always think about. Do you think that could activate?
It could be. It could be. And what you're talking about, Kairos, is a perfect example of it's easy to refute the official story, and then it's another level challenge to figure out what's going on. We know from current research that bricks do store energy. We know from current research that plants are communicating to each other. We know that they have chemical defenses. And so it does raise the question of what else is going on that we don't know. And in nature, I think we're going to find that there is a whole connection that somehow human beings have been cut off from. And I think that is by design by our wannabe masters, because if they're going to be evil, you don't want the work animal class, that's us, being connected to nature and being connected to each other. They want us separate and frightened and grateful to have a job working for the Empire.
Exactly.
The Empire, right? So there's that Star Wars connection in the background. So, what an exciting evening! I think this is a great time to conclude. Chris, it was great that you were able to slide in. I wish we had a little more time. Carl, I would love to stay in touch with you and possibly invite you to come back for a discussion on another topic. That would be,
I'd be honored, brother. Thank you.
That would be very good, and it's much appreciated that you take your time and conversation seriously, and you give us an audience. So we do appreciate that. Probably have. Where's the best way to follow your work?
carlbherman.blogspot.com, and on BitChute, if you go to Jim Fetzer's channel, we have a new show 3 times a week, taking a look at current affairs in the context of history.
Very good. I have your Blogspot link in my video description, so I would encourage anyone that would like to deep dive into a wide variety of subjects that have been taken apart and dissected in an exhaustive and manner worthy of anyone. Wow, you should be proud of your research. It's easy to speak to you and listen to you. You make your point clear without hesitation. That's usually an indication of someone that's speaking the truth, I found.
Yes. And I do want to say it's great to meet you, Carl. And like Kairos said, thanks so much for your time coming on here and discussing this stuff and looking at our work and everything. And I do have the same links that Kairos has on Carl Herman in my description box too. But thank you so much, Carl.
Oh, my pleasure. And I want to thank you guys. And Kairos, you're talking about your experience of people. You get a feel when people are speaking the truth. And I get the feel also from when you're getting around people, call them truthers or patriots or whatever, is that they are so grateful when anybody actually dedicates and gives the gift of listening, and that you're actually participating in some way or another is gratitude, because part of the experience, and to your audience members to thank you, is that it is overwhelming. I mean, it looks like every agency has been captured by some sort of an enemy. But again, Emperor's New Clothes, baby. Something is going to break. The playing field will look very different. And this thing, when it does flip historically, when empires fall, it happens in an instant.
So that being said, the eclipse, take it seriously. Is that will we see a flip or just another day?
Well,
I'm hopeful. Are you hopeful? Hopeful?
We shall see. We shall see.
Okay.
I have a catchphrase that and I'll just speak as a human in a war. Brothers, I don't know shit about fuck. I don't know. This might be a huge energetic transfer. It might be some biblical event, or it might just be another day. I don't know. We'll find out.
Well said.
Chris, what's your outlook before we say goodbye?
What, on the eclipse?
Yes, sir.
Well, we won't be in the path of it up here, but I'm watching it and I'm entertained by all that's going on. Let's say.
I as well. I have a very positive outlook. I'm looking for something that's going to benefit many and correct some wrongs and be impossible to ignore. I don't know how that would look, but that's my hope. Not something terrible. Only good for those that need good. Good.
Yes.
Only good. Good outlet. Good outlook.
Good thoughts only. Good thoughts only.
Thank you very much once again. Carl, is there anything you'd like to say before we say goodbye? And maybe some of the other researchers you mentioned, my lunch break. We've spoken of John Levi. Is there anyone else that you think we should be watching that we may have overlooked?
Gee, on the spot here, I'd have to look at my YouTube channel list and to find
No
out.
problem.
You guys, all you guys are great. And again, just keep pushing forward. And I think life has a way of opening channels of exploration with sincere effort.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. Thank you very much. Well, with that being said, we're going to close out our exploration tonight. Thank you, Chris, for coming in. Mark from Our Melted Reality has been producing and working behind the scenes. And our featured guest, Carl Herman, has been here with us, and we thank you. And everyone have a great evening. Thank you so much.
Good night, everyone. Thank you so much.